This is Am I Right with Ralph Ferguson, Air. Thank you for coming and being a part of our program. And we're going to take and discuss numerous series of issues that are out there that are we want to examine and see if we know more about it. So let me start with you, Eddie, and we'll go. What are you looking at as a primary issue now, or non-issue?
Okay. Well, first, thank you very much, Ralph, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure and an honor to participate. I guess probably top of mind for me, Ralph, is the upcoming election, the national election in November, and what has just transpired over the last 2 or 3 weeks that will, I think, greatly impact that election. So that's pretty much top of mind for me.
Okay. Let me ask you a question about something, Eddie. I think everyone is being driven by this election process, especially since we've had Harris and Walz join and have Biden step out. So let me ask you a couple of questions while you're there. Did you bring anything to the table that you would like to discuss today?
The joy of having an Howard graduate as a president.
Yes.
Oh, at Howard University.
Yes, graduate as a president. The
As a
joy, the
president,
happiness.
as a president.
Yeah, the joy, the happiness. One cannot really express it.
So
The joy,
the institution has responded to having him.
yeah, the joy, the happiness.
Does that make Professor Ahmadiyya put him in a better position on campus? What does that do for you?
It make Howard University a world-class university with the same rank as Harvard, Yale. They have produced president. There are very few universities that have produced U.S. president. Very, very few.
For universities. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very few.
All right. Then let's look at the social and international scene. Are there any things you want to take and bring up for discussion in that area?
About this, well, what is going on? What is going on in Nigeria?
What is going on in Nigeria?
Because what is going on in Nigeria also validates that Americans take a lot of things for granted.
Are you saying that the last election is what we're talking about was being taken for
No,
granted?
I'm talking about economic and job opportunity in the U.S.
So I'm missing the point here, Ifusa.
Okay, I'm talking about the economy in the U.S., the job opportunity in the U.S. Americans take it for granted. Like, for example, unemployment job opportunity is about 4%.
Right.
In Nigeria, it's about 60%.
Whoa.
Like minimum wage. Minimum wage in Nigeria is 30,000 naira. And 30,000 naira is $20. Well, I mean, per month. I'm talking about per month.
Yeah.
So now, whereas people pay minimum wage is 30,000 naira per month, which is $20 per month in Nigeria. And they use this money to feed their family.
Well, the difference in economies also make a lot, also create that particular problem. And then, of course, difference in the way the governments are operating in Nigeria. For a long time, there has been a lot of graft in the oil industry in Nigeria. So therefore, a lot of those dollars and cents have not made it down to the working class people. But I think that I don't believe that Americans take their good fortune here for granted. I don't believe so. Eddie?
Well, okay. The reason why I said so was that 2 days ago, I went to the student cafeteria. I took some of Nigerians who were visiting me from Nigeria, and I took them to the Howard cafeteria. And these my friends were surprised that the cafeteria is buffet. By buffet, you eat as much as you want.
Right.
And at the same time, in the cafeteria, some students were complaining that the cafeteria food is very, very poor. And my friends were, when my friends from Nigeria heard what they were saying, oh, the cafeteria food is very, very poor, this and this, my friends were shocked. What? Look at the cafeteria buffet. You can eat as much as you want. There's a lot of fruits. You have fruit, banana, orange, rice, chicken. And they are saying the cafeteria food is very, very poor, low quality. My friends from Nigeria couldn't comprehend it.
Well, looking back, I had a friend of mine that was a student that was from Ghana. And what surprised him was that on every street corner in America, there's either a church or fast food service, a McDonald's or Wendy's or something. And he said, you guys get a lot of religion while you're eating here. But I do get it, Ifus. I get it. I've had a lot of internet. Well, the difference is being international people that have visited me in Lubbock or even here in the Dallas area that are from some African nations, some Asian nations. Their perception of our dietary habits and our interpretation of good food, bad food is uniquely different than the Europeans that have visited me, where they have a lot of conspicuous consumption also. But I think that when you have individuals that are coming from Liberia, Ghana, Kenya, Vietnam, Indonesia, and even some out of, well, you don't get anybody out of North Korea, but South Korea is a pretty hybrid international economy. But there is this awareness of how much we have, and then how we somehow reduces its value with a few words. And that's unfortunate, because I think we're better than that. I think most Americans, I've not heard anyone say, I want to leave because we got too much food and too much law enforcement or too much crime. I think most Americans say, let's use the food to give to the poor, and let's solve our problems with crime and guns and this type of thing. Am I out of step saying that? Am I being too naive?
No, yes, okay, right, yes.
Okay, I'm being too naive, is what you're saying.
No. We're in the same page, right? Yeah, we're in the same page, right?
All right. Well, Eddie had brought up a point.
Well,
that
can I add a little bit to this conversation before it changes? My wife and I have the fantastic privilege to host some people from the Mandela Fellows organization. Are you familiar with that?
Right.
Yeah. Well, so when I think this is our third year, we invite them over to dinner during their stay here with their association with Texas Tech University. And these are professional people, of course. And one of the things that's impressive for me is the number of people who are involved in the field of agriculture, the study of agriculture. And of course, that obviously relates to the growing and the development and the provision of food sources. And so it's a very important commodity. And Ifusa, you mentioned how the Americans tend to take this stuff for granted. But I was impressed to find out how many people are going into the field of agriculture from the African nations for obvious reasons. Whereas if you look at this country, I mean, it's kind of hard to find a farmer now, and the numbers are shrinking. Surprisingly, we're needing to feed more and more people because the country continues to grow. But I just wanted to point out how agriculture as a science and as a profession is a very important um, in for African nations. So.
Eddie, did any of them describe how mechanized the farming is in their different?
Yes, they mentioned the mechanization. They mentioned associations and relationships with other universities here, University of Texas, and the purchasing of beef cattle, and um, the working on developing different breeds and different types of plants that thrive in various environments, and it's all from of course, from an academic university level. So they're doing those kind of things and importing and using mechanized equipment where it didn't exist beforehand. So it's a very important field of study and development, and at least that was the impression that I got. I think out of the 9 or 10 people that we hosted for dinner that night, I believe 4 of them were involved in agriculture. So, yeah.
Did they talk in terms of whether or not they've been able to get rid of field rot in their country?
Well, I don't remember a conversation about field rot. A lot of it was developing the types of seeds and the types of plants that would flourish in different environments, and the best way to fertilize and to harvest those plants. Um, I think that was primarily what the conversations were about.
Okay. Well, no, that's really very important because there's a lot of rich soil and and across the continent of Africa. I've talked to people, Faso and Ivory Coast and other, but one of the things that they had told me was that when harvesting time came, all these food that needed to be harvested did not get to the market. So as a result of that, a lot of tonnage left to waste in the field because it did not get to the market. And many of these countries do not have freeze-dry technology. So there's no plant to bring it in, freeze-dry it, and then utilize warm water in remote regions to have a nutritious vegetable meal. So I just wondered if the dialogue had moved in that direction at all.
No, we didn't get real technical. It was sort of a celebration dinner, and so
Okay.
we didn't get too far into the weeds in terms of technology. So,
But that's good. I've worked with the Mandela Fellows. I don't know, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 years. I've been a part of it, and it really disturbed me. And I'm trying to remember the young man I brought it to their attention that these individuals that are guests on our campus really need to move into the African American community, be hosted by a family like yours, Eddie,
yes,
or to go to a church, and also meet other individuals in the community that are of African American descent that are contributing to the well-being of the community.
That is specifically why my wife and I chose to do that, because we wanted them to know that we're here and we recognize them. And it was a wonderful experience to look out on our table, a dining table, and see 10 Africans. It was just it was how often do I get a chance to do that, to share life stories and things like so. Trust me, if they got a benefit, my wife and I certainly did, and we'll continue to do that every year if we can. So
I know that they got a benefit because every time I dealt with a group or spoke to a group, they would always ask about meeting other African American
Yeah.
leaders.
Jeez.
They would
One
always,
commented, yeah, one commented, it was real food. My wife cooked greens and cornbread, and we had sweet potatoes. I mean, we did it up. So
well,
yeah,
let's move to the Manila Fellows is a wonderful program,
it is.
and hopefully whoever's head of the cultural center now, I don't know who's in charge of it now. I remember Tibor Nash was there, and then we had another fellow there for a while. I hope that they have opened the door to do more of engaging the African American community there in Lubbock to be part of that program. So,
Right. Well, let's
but
just hope. Let's just hope it doesn't get labeled as DEI and get on some chopping block. Of course, I'm being facetious, but a little.
yeah, well, no, yeah, that's very good. That's very good. It was really quite sad for I forget what elected official referred to Vice President Harris as being a DEI hire, and not respecting the men and women that had suffered
Yes.
to get diversity and inclusion, because a lot of individuals, the market was never opened up for them in this country if it had been something there to drive them. I think the one thing that I always found that was sad about DEI, and I remember when Dr. Munoz was heading that, and he and I had a chat about this, is that DEI is an organization and a university that does not have a budget to drive hiring or to help sustain a hire. So therefore, the only thing that DEI brought to the table was a review of applications. And I think that Dr. Munoz actually hired an attorney to certify qualifications of these individuals that had filed to be professors or administrator at Texas Tech. But inside the committee process within a college or within a department, the DEI could not say, look, if you really like this guy and you hire him, we'll match 50% of his salary for 3 years or 5 years. If he was a professor, we'll do that. There were a number of professors that I know of color that from education to engineering to biology that came to the institution at Texas Tech. And I suspect it's probably a national issue. They come to the institution, stay 3 to 5 years. First 3 years is when they get their tenure review. And at that point in time, they become very much aware that either they're going to stand a shot at getting tenure or there's no shot at all, and they just pack up and leave. Now, Ifusa, you want to talk about the exit and the persistence needed if you're an African American getting tenure to be at an institution, how that works? You got to put your mic on there. Your mic is not on. Ifusa.
Oh, yeah. Oh, very good. You can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Well, the thing is that it is very, very tough if you're a minority. And the reason why it is very, very tough is that they judge you based on 3 criteria: research, teaching, and service. And let's talk about research. In terms of research, for you to be able to meet the qualifications, you have to have a lot of research collaboration. But the challenge that minority faculty are having is that, one, most universities will hire minority faculty. They won't give them mentor. And they will also give them want to work with them. That was when I was in Arkansas. That was my challenge. I was in Arkansas for over a decade. That mentorship there was not there. And unfortunately, my colleagues didn't want to work with me. So I was now asking myself the question, why? Why don't they want to work with me? Is that they don't want it to be on record that they publish with a minority faculty? Well, fortunately for me, with the support from Professor Ferguson and other colleagues, I was able to collaborate with them. I published. I had a tenure in Arkansas and a full professor in Arkansas. In other words, most of my support was not within my institution. It was outside, externally. So this is the challenge minority faculty are facing when it comes to research.
Yeah, so DEI does a wonderful job at nurturing the students. It has limited or no resources at all to support hiring young PhDs from diverse cultures. Be you Cuban American, Mexican American, Venezuelan American, wherever you come from, there is no budget within that group, within that population of administrators. Now, the one thing that DEI does, and they have done very well, and that is that as you get students of different cultures on campus, they actually work close with them to try to get them mentors if they need a mentor, or get them in organizations to help them elevate their studies, if they're, no matter what college they're in. So when you look at universities, you don't have DEI hires, period. It just doesn't happen because there's no funding there to support those hiring opportunities. So when you get hired and you're a person of color, usually you are the only one in the department. And usually no one in that department collaborates with you on what is the most favorable journals for you to publish in that the department feel like have professional significance that would lead you to tenure. And this is just one of the natures of, and this is a current. Right now, I read so that universities are still highly white male dominated, even though there have been some females that have cracked the glass ceiling there. For the most part, very few people of color have done so, and hopefully this will change in the not too distant future. I know that I know that the DEI officers now are even talking with students about borrowing money when they come to a university. And at Texas Tech, that's wonderful because we have a very effective financial planning group. So that's very good. So because most of the students that are coming to these universities, a great percentage, I shouldn't say most, but a great percentage, are first generation students. So when they get the student loans versus the student grants, I remember when I was in school, they always called it free money. And there's no such thing as free money. It has to be paid back at some point in time. And what happens, especially with students of color, is that they need the money to sustain themselves. In many cases, some of them need the money to send back home. In many cases, they're single female heads of household, or they're in females in broken households, and the money helps subsidize the cost and of living as they pursue their degrees and advance their education. So these types of things have not been fully addressed. I think one of the things that I find most interesting, because as a private sector businessman, I know that banks forgive loans. Usually if a loan stays on the books for 10 years and it is not paid off, normally the bank will just write it down, except what has been paid. Whereas with government loans, under the Bush administration, it was set up so they can no longer be in bankruptcy. So basically what happens is a student continues to defer that loan while it's simultaneously continuing to accumulate interest to the point that your interest value on the loan is far greater than the principal. And there is no mechanism for rolling that back or forgiving it. I know that President Biden has tried several times to do that, to have a forgiveness process. And unfortunately, our political party that currently has the authority is not supporting that initiative. And I get it, that if you borrow the money, you owe the money, you should pay the money. But also, as with private sector practices, reasoning needs to set in and say, okay, if this person has borrowed $50,000 and now they have $100,000 in interest because of the long-term deferments, and they've already paid $25,000, why not forgive the $50,000 and don't, because the interest is not part of the record, just write it down. That was never owed in the first place. But unfortunately, that's not the way the market sees it when it comes to student loans. Now, before President Reagan came into office, students were given 70% grant money. So if you were able to maintain a C average, you would get a grant. And if you needed additional money, that would be that 30% you need to borrow. Well, under the Reagan administration, the loans were flipped. The idea is that education is a private good, so therefore the student needs to be more responsible for the debt. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. So therefore, you now have 70 to 80% loan, 20, maybe 30% grant. And those loans are earning interest while you're doing your academic studies. And so it creates a real conundrum for students and evidently for the market, because as I understand it, the most recent effort to try to get more loans forgiven has failed. And this is really quite sad in many ways, because that's money. When you're paying debt, you're not growing the economy. So you're not buying a home, you're not buying a car, you're not buying appliances. You're really just locked in a box with money in debt that you thought was going to help elevate your lifestyle. And it didn't do that. And right now, we have no formal remedy. I've read some of the rules that the Department of Education has put forth, predicating that they can forgive loans, and then President Biden signing orders saying, yeah, this meets the criteria, and then someone comes along and files with the courts, and they say, well, no, you really don't have the power to forgive monies loaned that are taxpayer dollars. So this is a discussion that's going to go on, it's going to advance itself, and it's a discussion that we need to have, because if you're getting a teaching degree, I think your best starting salary now is between $50,000 to $60,000. However, if you're borrowing $50,000 to $60,000 to get the degree, your monthly income is not going to sustain you to pay off the loan, buy a car, and invest in the common market, the marketplace. So let's go back to what Eddie started out with, because Eddie raised a good question about what's happening in the political arena now. We now have Harris and Walz, and we have Trump and Vance. And it seems like on the surface, because Trump and Vance have argued things that does not benefit females in our society, and Trump consistently has argued what he was going to do with Medicare and Social Security. And if he's elected, he has a Congress and a Senate, I believe, that would endorse what he's talking about. Then if you believe what's been said, now we know that the three branches of government are not as solid as a solid way of protecting privileges for citizens. We've learned that there's ways to navigate the three branches of government, which means now we need to have more elected officials with honest, ethical values, just like the Republican gentleman in Georgia that would not provide the 11,000 votes, and the vice president who would not overturn the election because it was not part of his duty. There may be a time now that we're looking at where we may not have those kinds of individuals in our government. So the question becomes, is it a real contest with Trump and Vance and Harris and Walz? Or is there a pending landslide with Harris and Walz because they're talking about doing the kinds of things that people need, especially people that have high education debt? Any thoughts, Eddie?
Well, yes. I would say that some of those people are already in place. The kinds of people that are not what I consider people of goodwill. Their secretaries of state and other offices have been taken over right now by people who may not do the right thing. So to your concern, your future concern, I think it exists now, that there are situations, I think, where there are people who may not be depended upon to do the kind of things that the vice president did, and the official in Georgia that you mentioned. So that's a concern for me. And then I pile that on top of just the general difficulty for specifically the Democratic Party with respect to voter suppression, gerrymandering, and those things that make it difficult for one party to be successful. It's not a true democracy, and I can go into the details on that later. But then finally, the point you raised, there's one issue that I think is going to be very important and very critical this November, and it is the right of reproductive rights, and of course we're primarily talking about women and voters, and this is going to be, I think, the difference in the election this fall. It's going to be how many women take this issue a certain how they react to what the Supreme Court did last year. I found out that there were two modern elections. I think 1964 and 1996 were the only two elections where white women voters voted for the Democratic ticket. All the other modern elections from that time, the white vote, the female white vote, went to the Republican Party. So I'm even that tremendous vote in when President Obama, so many people got on board that didn't get on board in the past. But I'm concerned, and hopefully the effect of what's happened at the Supreme Court level will, I guess, get women more involved, and more of them will show up in November to make a difference in the election, because it's I think that is going to be the deciding factor in the election in November, is how many women are going to participate. And I think that's going to be the big difference this November. And like I said, the driving force, I think it's going to be reproductive rights.
Well, Ifusi, you have any remarks to make on this? About the politics? Oh, go ahead.
About my remark is that, one, based on my experience in Arkansas, unfortunately, the minority student in elementary school and high school, they lack mentorship. So one of the strategies that those minority faculty who are successful, they should volunteer to mentor many elementary and high school students. Because failing to do this, will significantly and negatively impact the Black community.
Now, let me ask you, let's go back to what Eddie was talking about. Do you have any insights or thoughts about the Trump, Vance, and the Harris-Walz political ticket as it goes toward the election in November?
Yes, that is what I'm talking about. In other words,
okay.
Yes, because I'm indirectly towards that part, because leading towards that part, because I'll be so glad if Harris becomes the president. Because, one, Howard University has produced a president. I will be so happy. But I've also said that if you look at, because if the Republican becomes the president in terms of leadership, this will significantly draw back the US 10, 20 years backward.
Well,
in terms of policies.
Yeah, I talk to people. I talk to strangers. And I am somewhat stunned. You would think, Eddie, what you were saying is the reality, that women will gravitate toward Harris. However,
it's the reverse.
I'm hearing the same thing that women said about Clinton.
Yeah, the reverse, right?
Yeah, I don't want a woman president. She doesn't know anything. She's not very smart. There's a perception that female credentials are different than male credentials. Now, I haven't talked to dozens of women, but these women were not women of color. But I just find it stunning that you have someone that is marketing the right concept for national unity, and then you have someone that is marshaling a diversive concept that will not provide unity, and people are signing up to be part of that. One of the questions I asked in one of my conversations, well, who owns the border problem now? They said, the Democrats. So the Democrats. Harris has botched that up. Biden has botched that up. I said, do you recall the Republican Party developing a legislative law that they were ready to vote on that was going to address the border problem? Well, yeah. Do you know why they didn't vote on that piece of legislation that would have elevated the Republicans for solving the border problem? Well, President Trump wanted to do it himself. No, former President Trump stopped them. And so therefore, President Biden, by executive order, had to solve the butter problem. And when I finished that conversation, the person said, President Biden and Vice President Harris botched the border problem. They had no concept that the border problem that was under the Trump administration had separated families. They got children they still can't find families for. They had imprisoned and locked up people that were desperately trying to get into the country legally by going through the border process. And then they had arrested and detained people of color and sent them back to different countries, and they were American citizens. All those things that actually happened, no one remembers them now.
My question to you is that why do you think the women are not gravitating towards VP Harris? Is it because that is my thing I'm trying to, because that is why I say we should start educating the young ones so they can be able to reason. Because what you just said is true, because you can see, like, for example, let's look at Obama. Because the Obama healthcare system was fantastic. Was fantastic. Because of Obama, a lot of people have access to healthcare. But when I was in Arkansas, those who needed the most, the white people, the low-class white people who needed the most, were the ones who were criticizing Obama. Because in Arkansas, yes, because I now ask myself, he give you guys free healthcare, which previous presidents have not done. And you who needed the most, and it's helping you. Even my brother, my younger brother is a medical doctor. He said it, that you see some of all these low-class white people, Caucasians, they have access to medical. If he's treating them, they will be criticizing Obama. Say, look at this idiot. Look at the way to give us all his healthcare is not bad. His healthcare is bad. He will not be wondering. If not him, you won't have access to this healthcare. Yeah. So in other words, that is a question I am asking myself. Somebody give you something that will advance your life, and you are still criticizing the person. Why? Is it because your mind has been poisoned, or lack? I can't really find the answer.
Well, what happens, and for those of us that remember World War II, there was a propagandist named Goebbels. Goebbels was his name. He was a propagandist for Adolf Hitler. And one of the remarks that is attributed to him is that people will believe anything if you say it long enough and persistent enough. They will believe anything. And what has happened is, I've heard the exact same thing. Well, former President Trump is the reason I've got health care. Well, no, you got Obamacare. Well, no. Former President Trump did this for me. Okay? Even now, I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of it. The reason that we have a recession was that our former President Trump thought that he could drive the world by levying tariffs on all products, using tariffs as a tool to manipulate conduct. And he used it, and it did manipulate conduct. But everything in the country went up 50 to 100%.
But can I add, Ralph, that he also convinced people that those tariff dollars were going to be paid by the other countries and not Americans, and they believe that.
I know, but I think part of what it is that nobody wants to know or think that they've gotten on the wrong horse.
Right. Yeah. It's
They feel like, okay, I got to defend. I made this decision. It's not going to work out for me, but it's kind of like when former President Trump got in office. Everybody said, "Oh, he'll change. The presidency will change him." The presidency did not change him. What it did was give him more clues on how to strip out government, how to end unions, how to end civil service, how to end police associations, how to end judicial associations. And these are things that people had not considered. And of course, they say, well, that's not really going to happen. Now we're at the point where if someone says it, you need to look around to find out what has that person done that represents what he is saying. And if you find that product, then it's time for you to go the other direction. And we're just simply are not there. And I taught my grocery store basket guy must be 90 years old. Bud, why are you still doing this? Oh, I need to get federal insurance, and what I saved is not carrying me far enough. Oh, I need more money. I didn't plan well enough. Well, more than likely he planned well, but what he didn't plan for was that after we go through the tariff process and we have a 10 to 20% inflationary process. So if you got $10,000 coming in annually as an income, you now have 9,000 or 8,000. If you got 100,000, you now have 90,000 or 80,000. So it's not that you didn't plan well. It's that your government did not consider you in its governance. And now we're trying to adjust that. It's just an insane process that, and now that we're getting more technology in place, we are going to have to do something that for the baby boomers, the final group retire 2030, 2035. Reestablishing Social Security so that you're not spending the trust fund's money is a very simple process for our Senate and Congress to do. It's elementary legislation.
Yes, it is.
But right now, you have a Senate and a Congress, a House of Representatives, saying, oh, we can just raise the age and cut the current recipients by 10 to 20%. And I literally know people that's the only money they have coming in. So if you only have $1,000 coming in a month and you lose 20% of it, that's $800, and that you're going to have now, and $200 that will not be buying food, paying however lifestyle you may have on that money. And I do know individuals whose retirement is Social Security and does not exceed $1,500 a month. And they're doing well. Their lifestyle has not been cut. They were worker bees, and they knew they get Social Security. They gotta maybe have a small retirement or no retirement, but they know I got my little house paid for. I've got fixed rent. I've got a car that I can keep maintenance. I can go see my son or my daughter. I know if I get in desperate need, they'll help me. But if you spent 30 to 50 years working in this country, that should not be an option for you.
Right.
We should respect those taxpayers. It's just like my dad was a small businessman. And I can remember back in the um, late 60s and early 70s when they start stripping away write downs for small business people, but did not strip away write downs for large corporations like Exxon, Shell, Bank of America, American Express, etc.
Well, yes, I agree with you, Rel. And can I add? I look at a Venn diagram. There's an overlap, and I want to talk about the two predominant political parties, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. There is an overlap. I mean, let's be honest as Americans. There's overlap. We all want security in our communities. We all want to be able to have a good job, provide for our families, and then there's overlap. But then on the outside, on the peripheries, there are profound differences that affect people's lives. The one party wants to cut taxes for the wealthy and make them more wealthy, and the other one wants to level the playing field, so to speak, and allow for the transfer of wealth, allow for the accumulation of some, not, I don't mean rich, but to be comfortable in let's say retirement, like you were talking about, and to be able to pass that on. And those are I think two of the striking differences between the two parties. One is concerned with the well-being of the wealthiest who don't really need that help to begin with, and the other one is concerned with with the regular the citizen, the hardworking person who's spent all his life working and wants to retire comfortably. So those two things, those are the fundamental differences. But now, and that's what people have been voting on in the past. And let me tell you, um, I've never really feared about where our country was headed, even when the Republicans took office. I mean, George Bush, I had a number of disagreements with him. I mean, if I go back and look at all the Republican presidential candidates, especially Ronald Reagan, I mean, I disagree with a lot of their policies, but I never went to bed worrying that I'm going to wake up in the morning, and the world is going to be on fire. So I say that to say that this one is different in November. Not only are we concerned about that Venn diagram, that where the haves and the have-nots and the things that I mentioned earlier, but we're talking about critical things like the Constitution, the continuance of what we've had to be able to thrive, to be successful, rights, liberties. Those are things that are on the ballot now. They may not be a line item on the ballot, but they're there. And what disturbs me is that people don't recognize that this election is more than just I'm going to vote for the Republican or I'm going to vote for the Democrat. There are higher order line items like the Constitution, the right to control one's own body, the right to vote, and those kind of things. And that's what's disturbing to me. I don't think that enough Americans can see that these are the things that we're talking about this November. We really weren't talking about those things in the past. I didn't like some of the outcomes, but I was comfortable knowing that my country was going to be there the next morning. But I don't know about this coming November if things don't work out.
Okay. All right.
But I will say,
go ahead, Ifusa. Go ahead.
I will say that this is the first time US president election is so personal. And maybe the reason why I say it's so personal to me is that I have seen the passion, my colleagues, my students. We must produce a president. hold a degree from Howard University. Period.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're almost at the end of our time. We started really late, but we're almost at the end of it. But let's go back to something that's happening now, and it's happening in the farming market right now. So we're going back to agriculture. Are you aware of the term night soil? No. In China, they used to do this. What night soil is turning human waste into fertilizer. You put it on a field, you grow plants, you grow your vegetables, you put it over your grass, you feed your cattle. The history of night soil is that it's very dangerous. It creates toxicity in animals, and it runs off into the streams and creeks and wind up in your freshwater systems. So, but now there's a company that's selling human waste, and they're being honest. They're not making excuses. Hey, this is human waste, and we're using it and selling it as fertilizer. And some small towns, because I guess it's inexpensive, they've already started lining up and saying, hey, this stuff is toxic. We know about night soil. We don't want this in our farm fields, getting into our subterranean waters, getting into our creeks, getting into our animals. So, how many? Am I the only one that's heard about this human waste manufacturer that is now in the state of Texas, by the way, who is distributing this kind of fertilizer and asking farmers and ranchers to put it on strips of their land?
Well, are they saying that it's safe or what?
Oh yeah, they're saying it's safe, but when you look at the chemical toxicology reports, the same toxicity is in it that makes it a pollutant. Now we're still waiting on a federal agency to say, yeah, we can use it, yeah, but my question is, since I'm aware of my reading about night soil in China and its devastation, is this something we really want? Is to have our own crap processed and given back to us in our lawns and in fertilizer bags? Is that what is that a goal and mission of ecological manipulation? I guess I don't know how to address it.
Recycling.
Yeah. Ecological is that ecological recycling that we really want? Any thoughts?
Well, my thought is that if that we produce food in Nigeria, it is okay. Because there's starvation in Nigeria, starvation. Any fertilizer that we produce food, and people are really hungry in Africa, most in Nigeria, they are really hungry.
Despite all the wealth they have in Nigeria.
Corruption, yes, they are really, really hungry.
Okay. First, it's got to be economical to produce, number one. It's always about the dollar. So
somebody check that out.
If it fails that test, it ain't happening. Number two, the risks have to be fewer than the benefits. That's number two. And number three, you can't tell anybody you're doing it. That's no, I don't know. That's a joke. That one. But yeah, so I mean, it's we're fecal material is used in fertilizer. That's been happening since the dawn of man. But making it so that the risks don't outweigh the benefits, that's the big deal right there. And if you can do that and you can manufacture it economically, then it's going to happen. Those are the two criteria. So what people think about it is going to be irrelevant because that it's going to happen if that's if you're able to do that. So
Well, I'll continue to watch this thing that's going on in this little community. This
yeah, and you mentioned China. Are you saying China is already doing that?
no, China had been doing it and ceased doing it
Oh, okay, yeah,
because of the
killing people.
hazard.
Yeah,
the hazard of night soil.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, because our waste is very toxic.
yes. It's very toxic. It has stuff in there you don't want in the soil.
But
Yes.
anyway, I'm going to continue to. In fact, I actually may drive out to this little town because it's only about an hour and a half, 2 hours away, and sit in on their next big city council meeting when they're talking. The farmers that know about it are really saying, "Hey, we don't want to go here. We don't want to go there." Citizens that understand what night soil is are saying, you're not getting rid of all the toxins that's in the waste. So that means it's going to flow into our rivers, eventually get into our subterranean waters. Can you tell us that's not going to happen? And the guy in this little interview thing said, well, no, I can't tell you it's not going to happen. He said, I don't even make the product. I'm just a salesperson. So he dodged that bullet big time. So I suspect the next time one of the corporate people, probably a chemist, is going to come out and say, here's the model, and this is what we're doing, and it won't hurt you. Okay? That's just like what was that, the Tuskegee? Hey, we're going to give you a shot, it won't hurt you. Okay. All right, gentlemen. Thank you, Ms. Lopez. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Air. We appreciate you listening to us and being a part of our program. We'll see you next month, second Saturday, 2 p.m. Ralph Ferguson signing off. Have a good day.